The Super Bowl has ended. Fantasy football season has ended. Football season has ended. But I have good news. It is now the season of love, or at least a day of love. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And what better way to spend your Valentine's Day than watching a video about a guy talking about where the best fits are for fantasy football weapons here as we approach free agency in the NFL. I've done a series now on every single team and talk about every team situation. As far as free agents go, you can watch that right here on the channel. But now let's talk about those players as individuals and where those players should land for the purposes of fantasy football. Now, I do want to preface this. This is not a predictions episode. This is kind of an ideal fit situation, right? So I'm not really getting bogged down in who has the salary cap to make it work. This is simply where I would like to see these players go and what would make me probably rank them the highest that I possibly could for my 2024 fantasy football rankings. Let's start things out with the running back position here, and let's start out with Josh Jacobs. You know, he was excellent just a couple years ago. He was RB3 on the season. Kind of a down year last year, and Josh Jacobs always kind of been that fringe RB1 type of guy outside that big breakout year. I want to send him to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, DAndre Swift, we'll talk about him here again in just a little bit, but he was really, really good as a rusher in Philly this past year, better than he's ever been. And I do think the offensive line is a big part of that. It's going to take a hit with Jason Kelce probably retiring, but I still think that system is in place and would be excellent for Josh Jacobs. He is a running back who does not need to catch the ball to be at that level that he's been at before. I don't think there's any fit where I'm going to go into the season saying Josh Jacobs top 5, but I do think Josh Jacobs in Philly is a spot where I can see myself ranking him in like the 8 to 10 range, you know, maybe 12, but he can get back in that RB1 conversation, you know, with a spot in Philly. Saquon Barkley now, this is another guy who's had the highest of highs you can have in fantasy football. And we've really been frustrated with Saquon, the lack of touchdowns, right? Because he's on the Giants. He's always been on the Giants. They've always had crap offenses for as long as Saquon Barkley's been there. So let's put him on a fun offense here. Let's send him to the across-division rivals, Saquon Barkley on the Dallas Cowboys. He goes in there, would immediately get the big workload, high-scoring offense. He's a guy who's going to show that he can handle the big workload. Many times he's done that with the Giants. I think they would throw the ball to him a little bit more than maybe we've seen from times with the Giants, right? Because Jones runs a little bit too much for your liking as a pass-catching running back, and just more scoring opportunities, right? You know, 2 seasons ago, we saw Ezekiel Elliott have a little bit of value just by scoring touchdowns. So I think that Saquon in Dallas would be an absolutely outstanding fit. I'd be really excited about that. What does that mean for Tony Pollard? He was just in Dallas. Well, I want to put him in a spot where he can thrive a little bit more, where he can have a bit of a slug open up the running lanes a little bit for him here. I want to send Tony Pollard to Cincinnati. And then Tony Pollard can go back into the role where he really thrived in Dallas, where he was the gasher, right? He was the slash. He was the lightning to the thunder. And he can be that big play guy again. I think as we've had a lot of injuries now with Joe Burrow, we need to see him throwing the ball to his running backs more often. He's also a guy who's likely to lose a couple of weapons this offseason. And so bringing in a running back here could be a bit of a more affordable move to really be able to keep this offense alive. And I think it would be great for Tony Pollard. Now, we've talked about a couple big-time running backs who have had great finishes before. But let's go on and talk about yet another running back who has had great finishes, and that is Derrick Henry. Now, I posted this question on Reddit a couple days ago, like, hey, here's a whole list of players. Where would you like to see them land just for fantasy football purposes? And by far, the number one answer on that thread was Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I personally, as a Ravens fan, am not totally in love with the idea of the team paying a 30-year-old running back, but I have to admit that, you know, stylistically, it does make a whole lot of sense to put that big hammer there alongside Lamar. As long as the wheels don't fall off, and hey, they haven't fallen off yet, but I'm not a big Henry guy. I think that there have been times over the last 2 years where he's looked real slow and not the same Derrick Henry as before. I would be a little hesitant on this one, but I do think it's the best landing spot for him, Another one that a lot of people commented on was the Los Angeles Chargers. And I do think that would also be a really great landing spot for him with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman there now as the OC. That's another spot I'd really like to see Derrick Henry land. And let's talk about those Chargers, because Austin Ekeler is a free agent. He's been their running back the last handful of years. Talk about another guy who's been at the peak of running backs, right, among the last 6 or so years. Austin Ekeler, he fell off hard this past year. And maybe it was just the ankle. I don't know. That's the thing we're going to get into. Now, CJ Stroud in his rookie year did not really throw the ball to his running backs at all. Damian Pierce only had 13 catches, and Devin Singletary had 30. So there is a bit of a potential role there that we just didn't see be a part of the offense in year one with Stroud. I could see that growing because Stroud, not really a rushing quarterback at all. He didn't really move the ball at all with his legs, despite being decently athletic. So this is an area that I think they could really add into their offense. And if Eckler's not just toast, which he might be, but if he's not, I could totally see Austin Ekeler having a really nice bounce back year in a high-scoring, high-passing volume offense. And on the flip side of that coin, too, by the way, Devin Singletary, I'll go ahead and send him to the Chargers there, and he can kind of have a feature role, but I'm also probably going to have them draft a running back here in this upcoming draft. Probably round 2 is a guy who can take over that role from Singletary, but I'll put Ekeler in Houston. Now, 2 more guys I want to talk about here, running back, DAndre Swift. I touched on it a little bit with Philly earlier, that DAndre Swift, pretty darn good running the ball for a lot of last year, but didn't catch the ball much. We know from his time in Detroit, DAndre Swift needs to be catching the football. So I'm going to send him to Minnesota, back to the NFC North here, and put him alongside Kirk Cousins, who, spoiler alert for later, I would be having him stick around in Minnesota, and this gives him an easy dump-off target, a guy that can catch the ball underneath, and a guy who can help keep Kirk Cousins upright and healthy, while also definitely being really just kind of a feature back guy in that backfield. Alexander Madison can kind of have his role a little bit between the tackles. He goes back to being a true backup running back. Ty Chandler, we saw some good things out last year, but go ahead and bring DeAndre Swift into the Vikings. Last guy I want to mention here, just because, I don't know, he's got a bit of a name because he was a first-round pick. Clyde Helaire. I think he's definitely a backup for sure, right? But just kind of look at the landscape of the NFL. The team where I wanted to put him is the LA Rams, because I would not be worried about him taking over for Kyren at all whatsoever, but it would give a definitive handcuff to Kyren. So it's kind of the best of both worlds there, right? Where I would not be worried about Clyde eating into Williams, so hey, that puts Williams to the moon, right? But at the same time, if things were to happen to Kyren, which things happen over the course of a football season, especially at the running back position, I would then have quite a bit of confidence in Clyde Helaire as a handcuff runner behind him. All right, quarterbacks here. Spoiled the one already. Talking about Kirk Cousins, I got him sticking in Minnesota. Baker Mayfield, I have him sticking in Tampa Bay as well. So a bit boring here among quarterbacks. I do think Geno Smith could be on the move as well, but as of now, he still is on the Seahawks roster. I could see him getting cut. Of course, this is Russell Wilson's stories as well. He's probably going to be on the move. But let's talk about just the big one here, and that's Justin Fields. What do the Bears do here? You keep him? You trade him? I think you're trading him. I know we're talking fantasy football, and this guy's name is not good to talk about when you're talking about fantasy football. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, with new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith, would be a really good, interesting spot for Justin Fields. Now, hear me out. Arthur Smith has really kind of wanted, I think, to have rushing quarterbacks, or at least rushing elements in his offense, right? Think about Ryan Tannehill. When he was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, there was definitely some rushing aspects. Some of Tannehill's best years came partly because of his legs out there in Tennessee. Then in Atlanta, Desmond Ridder was drafted. He's a pretty athletic quarterback. He used his legs a little bit as well. Marcus Mariota was also a guy under Arthur Smith a couple times. I think that's just something he wants to have be a part of his offense, but maybe he hasn't had quite the right guys in that regard. And then also think about the weapons here. I think Deontay Johnson's probably going off this roster, but you would still have a guy in George Pickens who can make some plays for you. You'd have Pat Freiermuth. That'd be an easy target for Justin Fields, right? You'd have the running game behind him that I think he can work with as well. I think it'd be a really, really good fit for Justin Fields in a situation where it's really hard for me to find exciting landing spots for Fields, right? I think that for his weapons, potentially, Atlanta is probably the other obvious one that you can put him with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. That's definitely the other one to me. But I want to go off the board a little bit because I think that's the one everyone's looking at is Atlanta. So I want to go off the board a little bit and send Justin Fields to Pittsburgh. Let's now pivot from pass throwers to pass catchers. And let's get the first one out of the way here, Mike Evans. I got him just going back to Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield, I have him coming back to Tampa as well. I think you just kind of run that back. Franchise wide receiver. I also just don't have a better place for him. There is something you said for continuity sometimes. And I think that Baker and Evans just really have good chemistry. And looking around the league, I don't see a whole lot of other spots with quarterbacks who would throw risks to Evans the way that he does, and where Evans can have some success on those deep balls the way he did in Tampa with Baker even. I think I'm just sticking with him there. Godwin would really boost, I think, from Evans leaving. But I think at this point, I'm not too worried about Godwin getting in the way of Evans. So I just have him go back to Tampa. I think that's what would be best for Mike Evans. Okay, let's do some big butterflies now, right? Big old butterfly effect. So T. Higgins, to me, the number one wide receiver in this free agent market. To me, it's not even close. I would much prefer him. I love Mike Evans, but I would prefer Higgins just because he is so much younger. I think he's pretty much just as good as Evans at this point in their careers. I've got T. Higgins leaving Cincinnati, not being franchise tagged. I just don't think Cincinnati can afford the 1-year placeholder franchise tag price tag. So I've got T. Higgins going to the Houston Texans as well. I've got the Texans going hard here. Going for Austin Ekeler and T. Higgins. Give me that CJ Stroud money. So T. Higgins goes to Houston, becomes a number one option, right? He kind of does to Tank Dell and Nico Collins what Jamar Chase kind of did to him and Tyler Boyd, right? And he becomes the number one option for this really high-powered, young, exciting offense. He's the go-to target. So yeah, I'm editing, and the Bengals are putting the franchise tag on T. Higgins, it sounds like. Ignore that. Enjoy the rest of the video. And then Tyler Boyd is also a free agent. I have him going to Tennessee. Bryce Callahan comes from Tennessee to Cincinnati. Bryce Callahan comes from Tennessee to Cincinnati. And so I think you put those two back together. I think Callahan's going to want that reliable veteran set of hands in his offense that knows his offense. So I think that'd be a really good fit there. I think Tyler Boyd can have some sneaky wide receiver 3 appeal in that regard on that team. It would unfortunately crush my sleeper story for Treylon Burks. Sorry, Tanner. But I think I'm willing to do that for Boyd here. And then there becomes this big vacated target void in Cincinnati. Who fills that role? Odell Beckham Jr. goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. They've got a great history of bringing in, these diva wide receivers, right? So yeah, let's bring on Odell Beckham, right? Rekindle that old flame of archetype, right? So Odell then becomes a number 2, where I think he'd be a whole lot better fit than as number 1. He's number 2 then, behind Jamar Chase. I think that'd be a really good way for all that situation to kind of shake itself out. I would still be happy with Burrow's weapons. I'd be happy with Higgins being a number 1 target. I'd be happy with Boyd as a probable number 1 target, again in that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 kind of role for fantasy purposes. But I think that's a really good scenario for all these guys involved. Another quick hitter, boring here. I've got him just staying put. That's Michael Pittman. I've got him staying in Indianapolis with the Colts being the number 1 wide receiver for Anthony Richardson. I don't love the pass volume I would expect there, but I do think from what we saw from Richardson year 1, I am quite happy to have Pittman stick around right there. All right, let's move on to a guy who I do think will change teams here, Hollywood Brown. Arizona's been pretty good to Hollywood Brown. He got to be among leading target guys for the last couple of years here. Definitely has had patches of good relevance. But Marvin Harrison Jr. I fully expect to be added onto this roster. And so I like the idea of Hollywood kind of being in a number 2 role. But if he could be a number 2, why not be a number 2 for Josh Allen? I would have him going to the Bills. We've seen Stephon Diggs decline. And Stephon Diggs was a train wreck in the second half of last season. I think Hollywood could sneakily turn out to be the best receiver on that team if he were to go there, but it would be a bit of a disguise. He would definitely look like the wide receiver 2. He would smell like the wide receiver 2. I think he could end up playing as the wide receiver 1, while being priced as their wide receiver too. So I'd be really, really excited for this. Gabe Davis is also a free agent. I didn't put him on this list. I don't have a landing spot for Gabe Davis. I don't know. Ship him to Arizona so he can be behind Marvin Harrison Jr. Put Hollywood Brown on the Bills. I got one more for you here, also very exciting. This is another guy who I think is better off as a wide receiver 2 on his own team than he is a wide receiver 1, Calvin Ridley. Now, I already had some fun. I threw Saquon Barkley on the Dallas Cowboys. Let's throw Calvin Ridley on the Cowboys as well. How about them Cowboys? No, I'm not a Cowboys fan. I'm a Ravens fan. Ravens don't spend in free agency. I don't have any Ravens players on here. Or I guess I did have Derrick Henry. So, Calvin Ridley to Dallas. I would like to see them upgrade from Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup and kind of those targets get shifted over to Calvin Ridley. I think that'd be really good for him. I think it'd be really good for Dak. Lamb, it would hurt a little bit because he no longer becomes a pure number 1 overall alpha wide receiver. But we've seen Lamb thrive with a second really good wide receiver with him before. I think we can see him still be excellent. All right, tight end stinks. Let's just talk about some tight ends here at the end of the episode. If you made it this far, be sure to subscribe and like because I love you. Thank you for being this far into this thing. Thank you for spending your Valentine's Day with me as we talk about some tight ends. So Dalton Schultz had a really nice couple of years in Dallas, then really, decent year in Houston as well. I like the idea of him kind of doing again what I expected him to do this past year, where he was kind of just a target hog possession tight end, right? Do it in Carolina. Carolina, not much there as far as weapons go. They're going to try to bring in guys. I just don't know how successful they're going to be with that. So bring on in Dalton Schultz here and just give him like 110 targets at tight end to be that safety blanket, keeping Bryce Young nice and warm on those 3rd and 7s. They can gain 4 yards or so with him. So then that leaves an opening in Houston then. And I would kind of like this to just be kind of a red zone purist type of guy, right? Hunter Henry is definitely that type of a player as kind of just a red zone weapon, a red zone specialist. So I'm going to slot him back in there in Houston. So I bet Houston's spending a ton of money on weapons here, all over the board. But I just realized that, man, yeah. Well, you know what? It is what it is, guys. Hopefully it happens because CJ Stroud would be really great for all these guys. And so Hunter Henry could go there and be excellent for them. So my last one here, I think is a very great sleeper. I'm excited about this one. Noah Fant. Remember how nice he was in Denver all those years ago? How he was an exciting young tight end. He was athletic. He was really good. We all really liked Noah Fant. We were all waiting for the big Noah Fant breakout. It just kind of never happened. Then he got shipped to Seattle, and they don't throw to tight end, so it was never going to happen there. Well, now he's a free agent. Now he is free to go wherever he wants. I'm going to send him to the LA Chargers. Greg Roman has always used his tight ends. Even in Buffalo, freaking Charles Clay was one of their featured weapons when Greg Roman was there as the offensive coordinator. Of course there's the Vernon Davis years. Of course there's Mark Andrews as well. Why not make Noah Fant join that group? The LA Chargers tight end, whoever it is a player I will be excited about next season. So guys, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching as we made some matches in heaven here for these free agents and NFL teams. Happy Valentine's Day. Do you love any of these pairings? Do you love anybody at all on this wonderful Valentine's Day? Do you love me? If you do, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that like down below so we can see each other again sometime. It was great to hang out with you. Great to make a match here as well, as we also made the wonderful match of DAndre Swift with Minnesota Vikings, right? Please be the DAndre Swift to my Minnesota Vikings. And go ahead and stick around, guys. We're going to have some more stuff coming up here as free agency hits. And look, as this news really starts to roll in, we're going to be sure to kind of put up some videos as they happen with reactions to these. What's your favorite landing spot that I mentioned here? Do you have any as well? Put those in the comments down below. Where would you like to see these free agents land? I'll put that whole list in the description, and you can just copy and paste them over easily that way and swap out the teams for your own team. So until then, guys, we'll see you next time.